All right, folks. Thank you, Katie Liu and Jin Hee, Catherine Lee, for those wonderful musical interventions. We're now going to continue our program with Eline De Jong's RQT Fellowship Project, which is about equipping society for responsible quantum innovation. Eline.
Hello, everyone. I'm still Eline De Jong, and it's a pleasure to be here today and to get the opportunity to share some of the things that I'm currently working on. I am pursuing my PhD at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and my research focuses on the philosophical and ethical questions that come with new and emerging technologies like quantum technology. And I'm also, in addition, honored to serve as a research fellow at the Stanford Center for Responsible Quantum Technology. And in the next 50 minutes, I will introduce you to my research fellowship project titled Equipping Society for Responsible Quantum Innovation. So I will first give you a recap of the C framework for responsible innovation that Professor Gasser and I introduced earlier. And I will then point to 3 philosophical challenges that I see within this framework. And I will discuss how I aim to unpack and address these challenges in my research project, and I will conclude with a short summary. So first, to briefly refresh our memories, the C framework for responsible innovation grounds responsible quantum innovation in 3 objectives of safeguarding, engaging, and advancing society. So according to this framework, responsible innovation is about addressing risks, seizing opportunities, and involving society in this process. And if we want to practice what we preach, I think there are some questions that we have to address first. And the first is, how do we define risks? And how can we engage society in an effective way? And how do we define what is the right kind of impact? And underlying these questions is, I think, another key question, which is who decides? So who decides what counts as a risk, or what counts as an opportunity, or what counts as a relevant voice that should be heard in this process? And in my research project, I aim to unpack and address these questions, which I think are important to address if we want to effectively safeguard, engage, and advance society. So I think if we want to do this in an effective way, we should take these questions seriously, and that's what I seek to do in my research project. And I will briefly talk about how I aim to do this. So an important aspect of responsible innovation is, of course, to anticipate risks. However, how do we define what risks are? I think that's a crucial question. And in a philosophy of risk is typically defined as a probability multiplied by impact. And that applies, for example, to the risk on side effects of a medical treatment. But in the case of new and emerging technologies, we don't know the probability of a certain risk. And if the probability is unknown, we do not speak of risks, we speak of an uncertainty. So in the context of new and emerging technologies, I argue that the concept of risk often refers to potential risks, mostly because the source of these risks, which can be a specific technology or an application, has yet to materialize. So if we take the example of the cybersecurity risk posed by large-scale quantum computers, the cause of this risk, large-scale quantum computers, is still speculative, because there is a lot of uncertainty about when or whether these cryptographically relevant quantum computers will be available. Now, it is very hard to act on an uncertainty. So if we want to avoid an undesirable future, we decide to treat something that is actually a possibility or an uncertainty as a risk. And I think this is a crucial move, because deciding to treat something as a risk has consequences for our subsequent actions and strategies for dealing with these risks. And we see this in the case of the quantum cybersecurity threat in the form of a society-wide transition to quantum-safe cryptography, which requires a lot of effort and a lot of resources. So I think it is crucial... Oh, can I go back? Yeah. I think it is crucial to recognize that in the context of new and emerging technologies, risks are often constructed risks based on expectations and on decisions. And I think that by acknowledging the constructed character of these risks, by making the underlying expectations and decisions explicit, we can have an informed discussion about how we want to deal with these risks. For example, about whether it's justified to apply the precautionary principle in a certain case. Because whether we are dealing with a risk or with an uncertainty can affect our considerations regarding the strategy to be better safe than sorry, I would say. So in a study that I'm currently working on, I scrutinized the potential cybersecurity risk posed by large-scale quantum computers. And I argue that this is a constructed risk based on expectations and decisions. And I take that as a starting point for an ethical discussion about who decides, who is in the position to decide what counts as a risk. So then the second topic is about engaging society. How can we engage society in an effective and meaningful way? So the involvement of stakeholders is often pitched as the bedrock of responsible innovation. And a lot has been said about why it's important to involve stakeholders in this process, but relatively less has been said about how we can actually enable people to engage in this process in a meaningful way. And my proposition is that engagement is epistemically conditioned. And with that, I mean that in order to engage in a discussion, we need a certain level of understanding of the subject matter. And this sounds very straightforward if I say it like this, but if I make it more specific, and if I say that in order to engage in the discussion about the societal aspects of a technology, you need a certain understanding of that technology, I learned that this becomes a tricky question. Why? Because we do not want to exclude people who are not experts in quantum technology from discussions about the impact of quantum technology, right? Now let me ask you a question. Who knows what this is? And who would be able to say something about the ethical aspects of this thing? So it's apparently it's impossible basically to think about the ethical aspects of a technology if you don't know what a technology is about, if you don't know how it works or what it's able to do. So who would be able to say something about the ethical aspects of smartphone use at schools? Some more people, yeah. And who has deep knowledge about how a smartphone works? So this is my point. You don't need to be a technical expert in order to raise relevant questions about a technology, but you do need some understanding of the technology. So in order to consider the societal aspects of technology, we need sufficient understanding of how a technology works and what it can be used for. But the crucial question then is, what type and degree of understanding enables people to think about a technology's impact on society? And that's a question that I delved into in two papers that I recently wrote. And in these papers, I developed the notion of technological understanding. And in a nutshell, technological understanding is the ability to realize a certain goal by using a technology. So you have technological understanding if you can recognize how you can use a technology to achieve an aim. Now, what the ability to use a technology means, how we specify this, depends on the context. And in my paper, I distinguish between three typical contexts: the context of design, the context of practical use, and the context of innovation. And in these contexts, technological understanding is specified differently. So in the context of design, it is specified as the ability to realize a goal by designing the technology. In the context of use, it amounts to the ability to realize a goal by operating a technology. And in the context of innovation, it amounts to the ability to realize a goal by devising a technology, to connect a technology to practical goals. Now, I argue that in order to answer or to raise questions about a technology's impact, it is crucial to have this innovation type of understanding, because this innovation type of technological understanding entails the capacity to recognize for which ends a technology may be effectively used. So this kind of understanding enables us to effectively think about societal aspects of technology. And then the last topic is a topic that I'm passionate about, but my thoughts are also evolving on it. And this is about how we can advance society by using technology. So I've noticed that responsible innovation is often about assessing the impact of a technology on values. But I think we can also turn this around and think about how we can guide innovation based on our values. So instead of explaining responsible innovation negatively in terms of avoiding harm, I think we can also explain it positively in terms of striving to do good. And you could call this a thick conception of responsible innovation, because it goes beyond mere process requirements of responsible innovation. And this idea of value-driven innovation transcends dualism, I would say, between techno-optimism and techno-pessimism, and instead it departs from the question, what do we value and how can we use this technology to better live by these values? So value-driven innovation takes values as a starting point of innovation. And it builds on the view that technological progress can create moral progress. It can create a situation that's morally preferable over the status quo. And there is a Dutch philosopher, Jeroen van der Hoeven, who even argues that if we have the opportunity to create a morally preferable situation, we ought to create it. If we can, we ought to create it. So according to him, we have a moral obligation to innovate. So in this view, responsible innovation becomes taking responsibility to innovate. However, what complicates this idea of value-driven innovation is, of course, that there are different ways of perceiving what advancing society means. So the crucial question then is, who is in a position to make their values drive the innovation process? And I think again, here lies a role for ethicists, not in terms of moral experts with a final say on what is good, but in the sense of uncovering whose perception of good is driving the innovation process, and in facilitating a discussion about alternative views on good impact. So in the next study, I would like to enact that role, and I want to uncover the values that are currently driving the innovation of quantum computers, and I want to explore how the innovation process can be made responsive to diverse versions. So to summarize, I pointed to three challenges within the C framework captured by three questions. How do we define risks? How can we engage society in an effective way? And how do we decide what is the right impact? And I discussed how I want to respond to these challenges in three studies. So I argued that we must acknowledge that the constructed character of risks associated with new and emerging technologies. I argued that we need a certain kind of technological understanding in order to engage in informed discussions. And I argued that the innovation process must be made responsive to diverse visions on good impact. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Eline, for being such a wonderful co-author and supporter of the center. The next talk is the RQT Fellowship Project by Professor Urs Gasser, who will present it together with his research assistant, Constanze Albrecht. It's titled Building Global Capacity for Responsible Quantum Technologies.
Well, thank you so much, and I promise it's the last time you hear from me today. After that, I will be in the listening mode, but you can look forward to hear from Constanze. So, as I already briefly introduced the project, the idea is essentially to engage and support local capacity building efforts in majority world countries aimed at creating ecosystem for responsible quantum technology. And so, in our view and experience, it's a good approach to start actually listening to what local communities, decision makers have to say. And so this fellowship project starts with a global listening tour. And we kicked off this global listening tour in Bangkok, Thailand, and are now happy to report some of our observations and sharings from that listening tour. We convened about a group of 12, 15 experts from different sectors, business community, but also government representatives that shared some insights with us where they see the trajectory of quantum-based technologies headed in the Thai context. We did that in partnership with Chulalongkorn University and the Digital Hub, Asia Hub in Thailand. We addressed a number of issues. So we started with kind of an overview of what's the policy environment in Thailand, and Constanze will present that in just a second, but then also zooming in on some of the use cases that seem paramount in the Thai context, as well as where is some sort of the heat map, the early heat map in terms of ethical and societal issues. And perhaps one of the bigger surprises was that, in fact, there is already a national strategy in place, and Constanze will share more about that with you.
Yes, so hello everyone. Our deep dive into Thailand's approach towards quantum technology begins with a very short overview of the roadmap that the Thai government established as a very comprehensive plan encompassing various building blocks ranging from outreach to application over the next 10 years. And they report a very impressive market growth rate of 33% till the year of 2025, and we're going to focus only on the two main sectors, which is first of all the outreach, where Thailand has already established international collaborations with, for example, the IEEE to promote quantum technology use in the private as well as the public sector. And on the other side, they also have initial engineering milestones. For example, established some National Institute of Metrology and Quantum Technology Research Hub in collaboration with worldwide leading universities focusing on quantum measurement. Coming from this abstract roadmap to the more practical use cases, Thailand has really recognized the great potential that quantum technologies hold if it comes to solving problems of hard optimization. So what they're trying to focus on, at least in the roadmap, is to use optimally technologies such as quantum computing, communication, and sensing technologies to tackle some of the main issues that they're facing. And if any one of you has been to Thailand or Bangkok especially before, you probably know of this huge issue of having a chaotic traffic flow. And so that would be one part, but also very importantly, since Thailand is an agricultural country, in making farming more efficient. So one thing that they're thinking about is using quantum sensing technologies to better understand the growth rate of plants and photosynthesis and use these deep insights into optimizing water management and power consumption pipelines to ultimately achieve very sustainable agricultural practices. And then last but not least, you've heard about that before from Timo, healthcare is a huge application for quantum technologies, but also very important for Thailand if it comes, for example, to synthesize new drugs for tropical diseases, but also optimize just general management, hospital management, and resource allocation processes. I mean, that's all great, but we really have to make some sort of reality check and contrast that with the technical state-of-the-art reality that we see in Thailand. And that is that Thailand is lagging far behind, not just if it comes to quantum technology developments, but we're looking here at the very basic technologies that are lacking in most of the Thai ecosystem. So in most of the sectors, they don't yet have established digital data storage processes and Web3 technology applications. And that's also represented in a very recent report from Deloitte from 2023, which showed that within the last 3 years, we still see very similar problems, and most companies complain about a lack of internal and external expertise if it comes to digital transformation, an immature digital culture, and very insufficient fundings, which lead to a very unsustained digital infrastructure. So we can see that will majorly constrain the attenuation of reaching these visionary goals that they've outlined in the political roadmap, at least in the near future.
Thank you, Constanze. And it's against this backdrop that we convened the working group to learn more. Where are some of the roadblocks in this transition to get to the vision amidst these realities. And so we want to share just 4 takeaways with you. The first one flows right from what Constanze presented as the grand vision over here and the realities over there, which is, yes, the potential of quantum technology has been acknowledged at the political level. So there is a strategy in place. You presented the roadmap. Yet the Thai ecosystem is very, and let me emphasize, very much in its infancy when it comes to quantum technologies. The experts highlighted 2 real roadblocks. One is fragmentation, and the other one is a lack of longer-term investments. In terms of fragmentation, and we'll return to that topic, you see real information asymmetries, all between the private sector and the government, public sector. You see fragmentation also in organizational terms, so the lack of a one-stop shop principle of government agencies being responsible for implementing the roadmap that was just presented, and essentially also other resource fragmentation issues that we can't go into given the time constraints right now. In terms of investments, and Constanze, I think you will highlight that yet again, we see also fairly modest investments in quantum technology in Thailand compared to some other Asian countries, for instance. And perhaps more significantly, the stakeholder experts were suggesting that the investments that are happening right now are rather short-term focused as opposed to take the longer view, and that this may actually lead to inefficient allocation of resources and also create new problems like that some of the country's own experts may move abroad because they don't believe that there is kind of a longer-term ecosystem building effort happening. The second key takeaway was the one that was, at least to me, one of the most striking ones. And the point here is essential that, yes, the experts agreed that it's very unlikely that Thailand will play any leadership role in the development of quantum-based technologies, whether it's in computing, sensing, or any other of the other areas. But here is a piece of good news, that Thailand may become a world champion in actually using quantum technologies. As one participant pointed out, Thailand is an expert in being chaotic, and that this chaos may actually drive use cases, creates needs that you may not have in other cultural or economic contexts. So to give an example, Bangkok relies very heavily on about 6,500 local stores for food supply. And these 6,500 local stores are fueled by local farmers across the country. And as Constanze pointed out, Bangkok is a mess in terms of transportation. Now think about the supply chain. You have a very distributed network of suppliers, very complicated logistics to get the food to these stores from local farmers who may, get sick, or where you have all these variations in production. So that creates a huge optimization problem. And so this was put forward by the experts as one of the use cases where you see the tremendous potential of something like quantum-based computing that addresses some of the optimization problems Constanze was pointing out. Now, the third takeaway is more about the policy and governance environment. It's fascinating that several of the experts in the room, by the way, also technical experts with PhDs from Stanford in physics, pointed out that there may be a real risk that the government, driven by concerns particularly around security, may hasten to enact restrictive regulations that may hinder innovation. So here again, the cautionary note from the beginning this morning is very much at play. There is a real risk, a perceived risk by Thai experts, that the government may actually not pursue an agile approach to the governance of quantum-based technologies, but actually kill innovation too early. So there are a number of initiatives that are underway. Some of them give reason to hope because Thailand is also engaging in international collaborations with countries like Japan, which have traditionally pursued a more agile governance approach, as we see also now in AI. But nonetheless, there is a lot of worry that innovation may be killed too early. So for the last takeaway, I took it back over to Constanze.
Yes. So the fourth and final takeaway is about building educational foundation. And one of the reoccurring themes you've probably realized throughout our discussion is the critical importance of re- and upskilling if it comes to building a robust quantum technology ecosystem. So what we really need are proactive measures to overcome these knowledge asymmetries and reach a state where we have quantum literacy and quantum awareness, even in the most developing countries. And kind of encouraging outlook that we've seen in Thailand is that they have already many initiatives that are up and running, trying to make significant strides to build this necessary knowledge fundament. And some examples, not going to go into the details, are that they incubated some academic programs for bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs, as well as established leading research institutes in the field of quantum technology. And I want to specifically highlight the Quantum Technology Foundation, which was also part of our panel, a startup that tries to kind of combine or bridge the fragmented sectors of business, policy, and the Thai people themselves, which is also a similar goal they share with other collaborations between leading universities in Thailand. Of course, there's still a lot of room of improvement. I'm not going to go into all these many improvement points that I could mention, but I think one of the most important things, at least for the first step, is trying to align Thailand's research standards to what we observe in the international community. And just to give you a short overview of our next steps, Thailand has only been the first exploration to kind of get a bit of a better understanding of the potential opportunities and challenges that we face if we want to build capacity for responsible quantum technologies, especially in majority world countries. And we're hoping to, of course, extend these efforts in other countries such as Latin America, sorry, Africa and Asia, and also in the summer better understand or refine the deep dive issues we want to tackle, and then in the second half of this year present our initial findings at various conferences, and of course in next year hope to present a synthesis report at the next Stanford Responsible Quantum Technology Conference that kind of gives an overview of best practices and a comprehensive and holistic understanding of, as mentioned, these issues we have to face if we want to build capacities from a true international perspective. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Constanze, for your impressive contribution, and thank you, Urs, for being such a brilliant and supportive co-author. Okay, the next speaker is Ryan McKenney, and he will tell us all about the industry perspective on quantum and law at QED-C and about the company he's general counsel about Quantinuum.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Moritz. So I am the Director of Government Relations and General Counsel of Compliance at Quantinuum. We are the world's largest pure-play quantum computing company, have about 500 employees split across the US, the UK, Germany, and Japan. And today, I'm going to focus on several things. First off, I want to talk a little bit about our company, just to situate where we are in the industry, and then I want to step out and talk about the role that industry has to play generally when we talk about responsible quantum technology. And I want to do this through this lens that the wonderful presenters have already set up in terms of safeguarding, engaging, and advancing. I would posit that right now, industry is not doing a great job in terms of safeguarding. We are marching 100 miles an hour trying to get to fault-tolerant quantum computers. We are marching towards IPOs. We are marching towards government contracts. It's full speed ahead towards commercialization. Obviously, that's what industry does. However, we do need to do a better job of thinking about the long-term consequences of quantum, of working with policymakers, working with academia, and leveraging organizations like the QED-C, which is the Quantum Economic Development Consortium here in the US, as well as working with centers like the one we're at today here at Stanford. Regarding engaging, I think we're doing an okay job. I think making cloud computing access available to academic institutions, to researchers, and broadly using open source software development is something that industry is trying very hard to do. I know we do it pretty well. I know IBM does it very well. A lot of the large-scale quantum hardware makers care very much about open sourcing the software and making the hardware available to all. Regarding advancing, this is where I think there's a ton of room for partnership. Obviously, as I mentioned, industry is moving full speed ahead. Governments are all over the place at the moment. Global governments in terms of quantum funding, in terms of quantum strategy, there's a lot of different mindsets. As Timo mentioned in his presentation, a country like Denmark punches incredibly high given its population GDP. The U.S., I would posit, needs to do a much better job in terms of having a strategic, aligned quantum strategy that targets investment and builds in guardrails throughout the system. Right now, there's a lot of money being thrown at quantum, but we're not doing a great job, in my opinion, of thinking about guardrails and really focused investment across things like the Department of Energy, across the Department of Defense, using the National Science Foundation, what have you. Part of that has to do with not wanting to pick winners and losers. As has been mentioned numerous times today, the technology is still young. There are still numerous different modalities of quantum computers, and many governments want to say, who's going to win? Is it going to be superconducting quantum computers through IBM? Is it going to be ion trap quantum computers like the ones my company makes? Is it going to be photonics, neutral ions, what have you? There's a lot of different modalities and a lot of companies putting a lot of money into those different modalities. All that being said, we cannot just sit back and either pull investment or pull the responsible policy making and say, let's just wait and see who wins, we'll deal with it on the back end. Obviously, we've seen that happen in other technologies, and we've seen some of the disastrous impacts that that has had. As the presenter said earlier, it is not too early to start thinking about guardrails. I would say it is too early to start thinking about hard law solutions, but it is nowhere near too early to start thinking about self-regulation, soft law, and building long-term smart pro-innovation regulation into government policy today. So all that being said, this slide just shows that we are a full-stack quantum computing company. We have a cybersecurity solution that leverages our quantum computer to create quantum random numbers to protect from both classical and quantum attacks, hardware, operating systems, and software across the board. A little bit about our hardware. A couple weeks ago, we just announced with Microsoft that an 800 times speed up in reducing error rates in logical qubits. That means that the NISQ era may be coming to a close. There's still too much hype in this industry, as has been said numerous times already. I agree with that. But we're seeing really important hardware advances across the board almost every day. And that's important, and it means that the quantum age is coming faster than many people think. Again, it's why we can't sit on our hands, both from a funding perspective and from a policy, smart regulatory perspective as well. I want to show what our quantum computer looks like, because a lot of people don't know what a quantum computer looks like. They don't know how big they are. They don't know what the hell they are at all. I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. on the Hill, and this is always the first thing I show to policymakers, because they don't know what a quantum computer is. They don't really know what a quantum computer does. So it's good to situate it in terms of where we are. I would still equate that we are somewhere in the Bell Labs late 1960s if you want a classical computing equivalent. This system, for scale, I would say is a little larger than the stage and is incredibly large and is very bespoke. There's a lot of different control systems. There's thousands of lasers. There's what we call an ion trap die. There's cryogenics that cool it to about 4 degrees Kelvin. This is not as cold as IBM and the superconducting systems, which have to be near 1 or 0 degrees Kelvin, but it is still very cold. And the machine is basically covered at all times that it's not in use by huge curtains to keep it cold and to also keep any potential noise out. A lot of lasers, a lot of optics. It's incredibly difficult to build, and our burn rate makes me sick. That's how much money we have to spend every month to make this computer work. All that being said is the valley of death is real. These systems are incredibly hard to build, incredibly hard to maintain, and require the smartest people in the world working around the clock to build them and to push us towards fault-tolerant quantum computers. All that to be said is that here's a further slide just about inclusivity across all the different platforms, cybersecurity, quantum chemistry, quantum AI, what have you. All that being said is that the role of government and the need for collaboration across industry, academia, and government is so important. I've got on this slide a lot of the US government action thus far. The National Quantum Initiative Act, which was first signed in 2018 by then President Trump, needs to be reauthorized. On September 30th of 2023, it needed reauthorization at that point. The committee in Congress, in the House, passed it unanimously. It has not been brought up to the House for a vote, and the Senate has not yet touched it. This is the bare minimum that is necessary to develop and drive research and development in the US quantum ecosystem, and it is languishing in Congress. I'm going to posit why that is, and I'm going to paint with a very broad stroke, and this is not partisan, this is just, I've probably done 50 to 60 government briefings basically for members or their staffs over the last year, and I'm going to paint with a very broad brush, and I think this shows the issues, but it also shows the opportunities for groups like this to drive smart regulation, increase funding, and move us closer towards the quantum age and all of the fantastic use cases that have thus been mentioned. One, quantum is really scary. China has spent between 15 and 30 billion. They're going to crack encryption. This is terrible. This is a national security issue. We're going to erect huge export controls. The US government needs to take control. We need to regulate this today, full stop. Two is that this is amazing. This is rose-colored glasses. This is going to lead to faster drug discovery. We're going to cure cancer. This is going to lead to solving the traffic problems in Bangkok. What the heck are we doing? Let's put all government money into this. We don't need regulations. Let's fund it today. Three is, you're telling me that the fault-tolerant age probably is not going to come till 2030-ish, 2031, the point at which, Pfizer's buying a machine, JP Morgan's buying a machine, FedEx, Amazon are buying quantum systems that solve real-world applications at that point in time. That's still 6 years away. AI is everything today. AI is all over the place. My constituents play with ChatGPT every day. They see the risks. They know what's happening. I'm not worried about this. I don't see the problem. You're saying that China might be able to crack it, but we'll probably be able to crack it too. Maybe QKD is going to come down. What are we worried about? I'm not going to fund today. I'm not going to regulate today. And so all of those three very different mindsets are driving what I would consider stagnation, both from a funding perspective and a regulatory perspective. And all this being said is there is a ton of work to be done on education about quantum, which I think needs to be driven by use cases, and especially tailoring this to the importance of the use cases towards governments. Because when you show use cases that a government themselves can use, can profit from, can take to their constituents, we're going to see a lot more interest, we're going to see a lot more funding, and we can build smart pro-innovation regulation in when a government is fully invested and strategically aligned. Whether that's a national security use case, whether that's like the Air Force Research Lab purchasing a system from IonQ recently, whether that's Department of Energy through the National Nuclear NNSA, finding use cases, whether it's finding the effects of aging on plutonium, things related to the nuclear stockpile, what have you, when you can find government-related use cases, that really drives innovation, it gets government interested, and it moves this process along. And as I said before, the Valley of Death is real. 2023 was the first year where we saw government funding globally outpace private funding, whether through venture capital funds, just private funding through large banks, what have you. And I think that is an opportunity, one, because it's going to force government to come to the table, both, again, from a funding aspect, but from a regulatory aspect as well. And it's going to make these groups even more important, where we're bringing the scientific community, we're bringing the policy and ethics community, and we're bringing industry all to the table. And again, part of this speech is meant to highlight the work that QED-C does. I think any organization like that, where you've got all of those stakeholders at the table, you're talking about use cases, but through the real, not playing around in terms of funding, that funding is absolutely necessary. Government action is going to be the only thing that gets us from today in this NISC stage through fault tolerance in 2030 to get through that valley of death, but it's also a hugely important opportunity for us from a regulatory standpoint as well. So we've seen a lot of government action thus far, but a lot more needs to be done, whether those are specific earmarks for governments themselves to purchase systems, whether those are research and development efforts such as the one that Timo highlighted earlier today, where we're driving research and development. But government action writ large needs to be strategic, and we also cannot erect unnecessary walls. While it is certainly not too early to think about guardrails, to me, it is too early to wall ourselves off and to make this fully a race. Obviously, China is a major part of every conversation regarding quantum. But that being said, we cannot have export controls that fully prevent us from hiring what is estimated to be around 30% of the global quantum workforce. There are not that many people on this planet who can help run, build, and work on quantum machines, and we cannot erect unnecessary regulatory barriers, and we also have to work across borders. Europe is incredibly advanced in terms of quantum software, quantum algorithms, and finding some of these near-term use cases. The US is very advanced in terms of the hardware side. We've got to make sure we work together, and whether that's through things like CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, export controls, which the rumor is that there are new U.S. controls due to come out in the next 2 to 6 weeks. We need to make sure that the regulatory barriers related to China do not prevent innovation writ large, and that we're working collaboratively and internationally. One of the best things that we can do today during this early era is finding the near-term use cases and also driving these hybrid quantum classical use cases as well. So our company recently sent a system over to Japan, which is being linked to Fugaku, the fastest supercomputer in the world at RIKEN, using it to find hybrid quantum classical use cases. That is a fantastic cross Pan-Pacific partnership that shows the US and Japan are both leaders in quantum computing. We're driving near-term use cases, but we're also building the quantum workforce for tomorrow. So all of this being said, I've spent far too much time belaboring that point, but there are a lot of barriers between today and 2030, 2031, the timeline often given for full fault tolerance and commercial use cases. And all that being said is that governments will play a role whether we like it or not. We need to innovate and we need to iterate working with government, industry, academia alongside to help build up these use cases, promote a global quantum workforce, and bring about all of the benefits that quantum will bring, while also being aware of the whether cybersecurity, national security, IP, some of the other issues that have been flagged earlier this morning. Don't think I have time for questions as the stop sign is up, but thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for your thoughtful and informative presentation. We now have a coffee and networking break with a musical interlude by Kevin Song, who is studying both computer science and music, and he will play Bach for your listening delight. Thank you.
Thank you.